Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel. Welcome to the Dice Tower. Boardgamegeek is the largest website about board games in the world. It has a ton of stuff there, and I'm going to be talking about Boardgamegeek a little bit over the next couple months or so and showing the different parts of that website because I think it's a fantastic resource for gamers. But one of the things that it does is it lets you vote on games, ranking them from 1 to 10. And they've put policies into play to keep things balanced, and they add dummy ratings so that a new game can't come in and instantly shoot to the top. And it can be very difficult to become the number one game. But some games have become the number one game, and I want to talk about those games briefly and why they were number one at any particular time. When Board Game Geek started in 2001, games were just being added to the database, and so at that time, Paths of Glory shot to the top. I remember in 2001, people were like, Paths of Glory, it's a fantastic game. And I said, it's about World War I. Did anything even happen in that war? At the time, I knew a lot about World War II. As a kid, I'd read tons of World War II books. I didn't know much about World War I. Paths of Glory is an excellent game from GMT that is about World War I. There's a lot of things that it took a lot of aspects from other war games at the time, but it was widely considered to be a fantastic game. I've only played it a couple times. It's not necessarily the style game that I want to play, but I can see how good this game is. And it made me certainly interested in parts of World War I. Now, Paths of Glory did not stay at the top for very long, because as voting occurred, more and more games came, more and more users came, and Tigris and Euphrates shot to the top. This is Reiner Knizia's game. Many people consider it to be his best game. It's certainly one of his most different games from everything else, although it has you collect 4 resources, and the one that you get the fewest of is your score. But this very vicious game really is back and forth. It was just remade last year as Yellow and Yangtze, like a sequel to it. But this game for a long time was the definitive game. And even when it was knocked out of the number 1 position, it stayed in the number 2 position for a really long time. It was knocked out by Puerto Rico. And for a while, we thought Puerto Rico was unassailable. It was going to be in the number 1 position ever. Puerto Rico, from Andreas Seeferth, this game in which you pick a role and everyone else does that same action and you get a bonus for doing it. This game is a classic. I just played it a few months ago. It still holds up so many years later. And there's a lot of these Euro games that are out there, but Puerto Rico still feels different. And had it been designed this year, in 2019, I still think it would have a really big buzz about it because it feels that different. Other games copied parts of it. I mean, even Twilight Imperium took part of Puerto Rico and used it in it later on. And the whole thing is just a neat idea. Puerto Rico was there for a while until it was finally beaten by one of the first buzzy games, which was Agricola. Agricola, which had it come out today, would be on Kickstarter for sure, make $500,000. But it had a pre-order system, and it came out in Germany first. People were like, what is this game? Uwe Rosenberg, who's he? He's the guy who makes Space Bean games and Bonanza. And now he made this big, grandiose game. And Agricola kind of changed gaming and having these huge amounts of options and, big, sprawling Euro games. It was incredibly popular, still very popular to this day. No game that's been number 1 on this list is not popular now. They've all have a reason to. And it made Rosenberg a household name. None of his other games ever hit number 1, but Agricola was there for a while. Then there was a battle between Agricola and Puerto Rico. Boop, 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 boop. And then there was this third one in the mix that finally shot to the top, and that's Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle, the game that pleases everybody. Euro gamers, war gamers, about the Cold War. Just a classic, well-designed game. Now, part of the reason that it went to number 1 was because a lot of people who might have voted it down never played the game, right? Because, if you look at it, doesn't interest you, you're not going to play it. So it has some of that in it, but also it really is an excellent game and is still, I believe, in the top 10. And was there for a bit until it was knocked out a few years ago by Pandemic Legacy. Pandemic Legacy was this big, grandiose Legacy game. It wasn't the first Legacy game, that would be Risk Legacy, but it takes Pandemic, which was an extremely popular game, go through a story and play through multiple games where the game changed permanently. It fascinated people. There was a vocal minority of people who disliked it, but that was not enough to stop this one from shooting to the top and becoming number 1, where it sat until just a bit ago when Gloomhaven, the dungeon crawl, which I never thought I would see a dungeon crawl as number 1 on Board Game Geek, But Gloomhaven, with its extreme fanatical fan base, of which I am one, voted it very highly, and it shot to the top where it sits at this point. Will Gloomhaven be there forever? No, because we said all these games will be there for a while. Gloomhaven is a great game. It's big. It's fantastic. I'm playing it even now at my house, and there's so much involved with it, and it's a really fun game. 3 other games were at number 1 at certain points, but not for good reasons. Life hit number 1 in 2006 because somebody found a bug in the system where they were able to rate it, instead of giving it a 1 through 10, they gave it 65,535. One person, which shot it to number 1. That was a bug, they fixed it. But the game of life was briefly number 1. Monkey Auto Races also became number 1 in 2007, where a user organized everybody getting together and voting it as highly as they possibly could to shoot it to number 1. And it made it, briefly. And Macher was number 1 in 2010, but that was because the owner of Boardgamegeek, Scott Alden, did it as an April Fool's joke also, and he just reorganized the rating system by the number of the games when they were put in the database, and Macher, the game about German elections, which is a great game, was the first game ever put in the database, so that was number 1 on that day. There also are several almost been games. Hammer of the Scots was number 2 when the website started. Kalis went really high, but only ever got to number 2. Through the Ages, a game a lot of people love, only hit number 2. Power Grid and Terra Mystica, both extremely popular games, almost made it, but hit number 2. Who knows what the next number 1 game is? I wouldn't guess. As we watched games go up and down in the ratings, I think in the last 6 months, I've only seen one game shoot up. I think Wingspan is shooting up, but I don't think we'll make number 1. What makes a game number 1? Extreme popularity, die-hard fanatical fans, but they're worth at least taking a look at. So those are the top games on Board Game Geek since it started. I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching the Dice Tower. We'll see you next time.